This is the End Penal Colony. It may not look like Pandora's box, but these islands harbor the cruelest and most inhumane prison in all of Minecraft. Who is the twisted mastermind behind the design? How impenetrable is it really? And above all, why would such a prison exist in one of the most peaceful SMPs on the planet? The answer might shock you. Ruben has a bit of a troubled reputation. To name a few, his name is synonymous with robbery, murder, and being an overall nuisance to be around. And while this wouldn't warrant a visit to the End Penal Colony, his victims would dig up whatever dirt they mustered to finally teach this menace a lesson. It wouldn't be long before Ruben finds himself the aggressor of a serious charge: the murder of a pet. This charge is considered the highest in the land, as pets and livestock don't respawn like the townsfolk can, which means that their death is permanent without the assistance of the server's admin, Derex. Surprisingly, this crime only constitutes a brief stint in Spawn State Penitentiary's minimum security holding. As a matter of fact, all crimes that are in violation of server rules are faced with a minimum security sentence, no matter the charge. Though the server's justice system seemed lenient on the surface, those who defied it rarely escaped unscathed. Some whispered that Derex didn't just punish rule breakers, he studied them, predicting every move before they could make it. The sentence can be as short as a few minutes or hours, to as long as a few days, but never more than a week in minimum security holding. But Ruben's pride was injured. His sentence was for 3 days, which in retrospect was a drop in the bucket of the time that he would officially serve. Regardless, Ruben wanted to make a statement to the server and its admins. No walls could hold him. So Ruben would make a decision that would forever seal his fate on the SMP. He downloaded a hacked client. Ruben's rampage was just the boost to his ego he needed. He did more than just kill virtual pets. He ransacked everything. From bases to caches and public infrastructure, his one goal was to tear down the society that thought it could contain him. Shortly thereafter, the true extent of his might was dissolved. Every block out of place returned, every pet revived, and the perpetrator is nowhere to be seen. With the flick of a keyboard, there was no more Ruben, no more rampage. Ruben would find himself suddenly encased in an obsidian cell, stripped of his weapons and armor. The walls spoke a harrowing message. Quote, "Wait to be processed and transferred to the penal colony." He was in maximum security holdings. In the history of the server, maximum security is known to be the last place someone goes before they are truly and utterly forgotten by the server. But even though he would never see the sun of the SMP again, his stay in MaxSec was as temporary as in MinSec. Maximum security holdings are only designed to be temporarily impenetrable. Prisoners here aren't kept long enough to be broken out by a third party, or themselves. Ruben was unfazed by this development. He was still high off of the dopamine he got from his rampage. He likely thought no matter where he was put, he would just escape over and over again. But he couldn't be farther from this reality, for mere seconds later, he was exiled to his final destination, the End Penal Colony. On the surface, it looked just like the normal end spawn, but a closer look reveals a much more desperate truth. A common saying on the server goes, "In the penal colony, nobody can hear you scream." And that was true, as the admins would mute the condensed chat so he could not bother the SMP any longer. As a result, desperate begs and pleads were written on signs along the colony, cries from desperate souls looking for a second chance. But the server has no tolerance for exploiters. It's silent. Nothing can be heard for miles. Not even the local Enderman made a sound. The deafening silence was torturous even for Ruben in his first moments in the colony. Though the server was full that day, he was isolated from everyone. Life went on without him. Ruben thinks for a moment. Surely he can't be contained here forever. He remembers that End Gateways had a chance to spawn nearby players to allow them to teleport to the main island and return home. But almost immediately, Ruben realizes a shocking truth. An invisible barrier the size of a room. He was unable to even leave his claustrophobic house of horrors. Despite the absolute inhumane conditions he was in, colonists would usually be subjected to much worse. For hours, colonists would be subjected to brutal tortures and beatings from the admins until they would log off from the rage. This was how Derex protected the server from malicious individuals while maintaining a loose whitelist and no ban list. Ruben was about to succumb to his fate of logging off the SMP once and for all. The damage had been done, and the admin was clearly in no mood to negotiate. But just before he could turn in his towel, someone joins him in the colony. She was the up-and-coming low-tier 3 SMP YouTuber, Snowfy MC, who had recently been accused of using fly hacks despite her insistence that she was simply rubber banding, a phenomenon where the player would return to a previous position repeatedly as a result of a poor internet connection. The two mute colonists both observed their absurd situation and silently decided that they could not stay here forever. They had to escape. The pair found an opening in the void wall that led to the outside. Momentarily, they thought their troubles were over. Escape was as simple as finding a gateway. But this was only the first of many obstacles that lay in the path of potential freedom. They gathered some blocks, food, and armor left behind by the previous colonists, wondering to themselves how nobody had escaped containment until now. Ruben and Snow quickly take materials and resources from a nearby structure spawned in by the server's admin, the old community house. This wasn't the only structure here. There were incomplete, modded mineshafts, old builds, and even entire chunks of land pulled straight from the overworld. Ruben and Snow were in no shortage of blocks for their journey, but their journey would be cut short by yet another obstacle, another barrier wall. This time it was much larger, spanning from the base of the end to its roof. For a split second, the two colonists looked hopeless, until they noticed another crack in the system, and it was caused by the admin himself. When he spawned in yet another chunk of land, it replaced the barrier blocks in that area with breakable stone.
Yeah, that's fair.
Please let my theory be correct. Okay. We're good.
And yeah, you're past the barrier wall.
It isn't long until their journey is once again put on hold as yet another, much bigger barrier border spans across the end. This one, however, is more menacing than the last. This border is 3 meters thick, as opposed to the previous border's 1 meter. Furthermore, the border wraps around the entire colony, and as the prison's final defense against escape, more caution is exercised around the area. No structures were allowed to spawn near this final wall. Ruben still believed that no walls could contain him, and looking up he got an idea. He thought that if these walls went all the way up to build height, then there would be a point where the wall ends, and the couple could jump over. Filled with determination, Ruben and Snow collect enough blocks to scale the wall, feeling each block bringing them a step closer to their freedom. In no time at all, the wall was completely scaled, but the pair made a terrifying realization. See, the server admin knew that scaling the wall and jumping over was an option, so he did the unthinkable and added a roof to the prison. But desperation often forces men to exhaust every means at their disposal to escape, and these two colonists were not ready to give up. They had one trick up their sleeve, a glitch, one that had not been patched to this day, the very bug that allowed players to access the nether roof for years. If a player uses a ladder and ender pearls with a little bit of precision, they are able to phase through one block above them. This, of course, relied on the fact that the barrier roof was only 1 meter thick, which neither colonists knew for sure. Despite this fact, Ruben sits up his chamber, gives Snowfie a reassuring nod, and throws his pearl. It almost seemed like Derex was always one step ahead of his colonists. He took into consideration every movement, every decision, and every instinct of his prisoners, and as a result, the End Penal Colony was truly inescapable. As the dust cleared and Ruben's eyes adjusted, he found himself back in the claustrophobic cells with the signs of help. His heart sank, and the message in the chat reinforced what he had just realized. Any attempt to teleport anywhere would have brought him back to that first place. Chorus fruits, end pearls, and even the end gateway itself would have brought him back here. He was well and truly stuck. He sat in silence, waiting for Snowfie to return and come to the same realization. But something seemed wrong. She was taking too long to come through, almost as though she was delaying on purpose. Perhaps she saw that Ruben wasn't on the roof celebrating and backed off. Ruben would wait a little bit longer. Minutes would turn to hours, and his impatience grew. He searched for his only contact around the barren expanse of the colony, but she was nowhere to be found. Unbeknownst to Ruben, Snowfie's plea of innocence was approved by the server admin, and she was released from the colony. Ruben was once again alone. The darkness of the end and the silence brought by the absence of any other living person nearby was deafening to him. Any future attempts to escape the colony were met with an immovable wall, quite literally. Even in the absence of an abusive admin, it drove him to insanity. And in no time at all, Ruben would accept his fate and leave the server. In a matter of hours, even before Ruben left the server, the townsfolk felt less burdened, and the server was returned to its peaceful state. In even less time, Ruben is forgotten in the annals of history, only remembered by a photo on the server's Hall of Shame. This peace and quiet is easily neglected by the townsfolk, who know very little of war and conflict, as while this happened, another server was feeling the consequences of an all-out world war. What happened? How did the least likely of powers claim victory, and what did this cat have to do with any of it? Click the video on screen to find out now. And thank you for watching.